Good afternoon, my name is Maria McNamara and I'm the CEO of advance.org. This afternoon we have Leanne Kemp, who's the Chief Entrepreneur up in Queensland, but more importantly, she's the CEO and founder of Everledger. Welcome, Leanne.
Hi, Maria. It's good to be connected. Fantastic.
I've been looking forward to this chat for a long time.
Well, it's Monday morning. I've had a couple of coffees, so I'm ready for it.
You're ready for it. Leanne, what I'm really interested in is why diamonds?
Diamonds are unique by their very nature. In fact, it's a physical unclonable feature that they hold. And we were able to crack the Da Vinci Code when it comes to recording that digital fingerprint. So, but beyond the scientific meaning of how we capture that physical or physical to digital transformation, we also knew and understood that the industry was undergoing a significant amount of change and challenges at this very same time. And as we all know, as we're all experiencing, necessity is the mother of all inventions. So a 500-year-old industry in the making, where most of the industry is hyper consolidated, both geographically and also by virtue of its trading powers, we were able to bring together an entirely new platform, a platform of provenance, to track diamonds from the source of their mine right the way through to the retail network. And it answers for questions not only from a consumer perspective of where does it come from, and now we can answer that question, but also it de-risks supply chains. And we've seen now more intimately than ever before what it means when a supply chain is at risk. And on the backdrop of COVID, or in the middle of the COVID response, everyone was scrambling around trying to understand the medical supply chain and how do we bring transparency to who those suppliers are, who those suppliers are. If we had digital twins that were readily available across that supply chain, we would have been able to de-risk the threat and the threat of lives.
So tell me, how old's the business now? When did you set up?
We're 5, so happy birthday to us. We turned 5 right in the middle of COVID in April 15, blew out 5 candles on the cake and celebrated with 100-odd Everlegends that are across the world.
And what series of fundraising are you up to? You bootstrapped initially, and then you got your angels to come in, Series A.
So we bootstrapped, and then the very first sort of seed investment round was about 2 years after the company started. And then we completed a Series A round last year with some pretty prominent investors. Rakuten, which is in Japan, they too have a platform, a trading platform. Bloomberg, Fidelity, and Tencent, which of course made WeChat.
So they're outstanding investors in a company. So they've obviously got confidence in what you're doing. And really what you've done is you've got the blockchain, a use case, which is diamonds, but you can apply this methodology or this platform to many use cases. Is that what you have? Is that what you intend?
It's interesting, people, when I first started, were always talking about use cases for blockchain, and Everledger was one of the very first in the world to be able to decouple the cryptocurrency from the ledger. But now they talk about Everledger as the proof case for blockchain, because we are one of the only handful of companies in the world that have real software solving for very real challenges and at an enterprise level that connects a whole of industry. So and that's a really interesting thought when I think about it from a founder's perspective, or even as Queensland's chief entrepreneur. We always talk about these use cases, but imagine if you're able to get that killer app that is the proof case.
It's phenomenal. And when did you move from an advisory board to a full board? Do you have a full board?
So I have no advisory board whatsoever, and there are 2 people on the board with me. So no, I'm busy putting all of my energies into my customers, Everlegends, our staff, and then also the product. So for me, it's great to have a guiding light set of principles. The board really sits as a governance overlay, and that's pretty much where it stands. That will change over the spectrum of time, but certainly that board only really came into effect, or the directors appointed to that board in August last year. So until then, it's all been about our team and our leadership team coming together and running hard. So I don't engage with external advisors. It's not really a part of the the culture of the
I
organisation.
think that's probably why you're at the 5-year mark and so successful, because you've been hands-on running the organisation with the people who are doing the doing. Tell me about your people. Did you go through the traditional process where, you know, you basically hire what you can afford, and then you get to a certain point where you've just got to bring in more experienced people? And where did you find them?
Look, everyone that comes to Everledger walks through their own pathways and for different reasonings, but we often think about the team as a collective mind that has the same mindset, but very different skill sets. And the leadership team, as I've formed today, 5 direct C-level executives exist in the company, and I have a chief of staff. So I brought the chief of staff on board about 12 to 18 months ago. Just on the backdrop of the decision about being Queensland's chief entrepreneur, and her role sits deliberately by my side to help lift the leadership team, and then also to help be there to make those internal CEO decisions when I am external and or on a plane at 30,000 feet. So we're very values driven as an organisation. We understand the passion and the purpose for the company, but we also link that in a very upfront way with the types of people that will join the organisation. We have about 44% of the company with female-led leadership and technical background. So they're involved in the technical and design team. So from a diversity and an inclusion perspective, when we think about the fingerprint of our Everlegends across the world, we're also operating in 6 countries.
I was just about to say, how geographically dispersed are you?
Yeah, 6 operational centres in the world. So Australia, India, Israel, China, the US and the UK. And I think I'm probably the only one in the entire company that only speaks one language. Most are bilingual, multilateral. They're doing all sorts of contortionary moves of mind gymnastics.
Now, talk to me about your customers. Who are the customers? Are they the retailers, the wholesalers? Is it the insurers, an amalgam of a whole lot of those, or is it the end user?
So we think about building a platform of provenance. It's something very new in the world that, of course, doesn't exist before today. But there are many platforms that exist that are 2-sided marketplaces that start with suppliers and buyers and sellers. But to build a provenance platform, you have to start at its origin. So our customers are everyone that touches the supply chain. So we engage with mining companies, which, of course, are our customers, as much are the manufacturers that cut and polish the diamonds, right the way out to the retailers and then consumers. So our customers are everyone that has to touch, contribute to the story of provenance, or extract the truth around the story of provenance. But we started as a project. So we were thinking about how do we actually bring the project around diamonds together. So we go from project to product to platform to ecosystem, and they're very deliberate leaps in how you would run and consider the organization, how you fund for those changes in the org chart. And we org chart change every 6 months at least, if not sometimes every quarter, depending upon the hyperbolic curve growth that we're facing.
So talk to me about your growth, because it's when you speak to people in the traditional market, you know, they're talking 2% growth, and they say that's a really good thing because, you know, the rest of the world isn't growing. And I say to them, well, in my world, in this world, 2% is, you know, what you might do in a day. But really, it's double-digit growth, and it's fast, and you've got to hang on for dear life. Is that your experience?
So I think it is really precision driving at speed. So it's 2 hands on the steering wheel, no airbag. Definitely 10% growth for us is meaning that we're getting out of bed and running the right pace, but we are sprinting marathons, because at the same time that we're starting to unravel the true potential of these technologies that are mostly hidden in white papers, we're also out there educating the market. So we're market makers at the same time as we're looking at inventing on top of, you know, the blockchain protocol. So they run at different speeds, and we see them visually in our organization as cogs and wheels and spokes. So we see them in a distributed form as a team. So we don't subscribe to sort of this hierarchical order and the traditional org chart. We spin up teams. So we have this teaming philosophy that you could be spun into a team. And each of those teams run at different velocity paces, just like a big cog would with a small cog next to it. So that works very well for us to be able to understand the speed and the output of the organisation.
So you're based, your home base is in Queensland. What keeps you there? Other than your role as chief entrepreneur, what would keep you there?
I'm not home very often, to be honest. So I guess I've been home more now because of the COVID virus. But the reality is I would spend a different week in every country operationally. So it took a lot on the physical and mental toll. But if you're growing a business, it's a global business, you can't really do it sitting behind a Zoom lens without being out, meeting customers and meeting staff. And that really put us in the perfect position through the COVID response to, to actually build back better and stronger. And we've been stronger and faster with really good cohesion in our team through that challenge. So I'm glad that I've invested, because we have a very strong root system within the organisation. And then also our customers, we don't see them as our customers. We see them as our thought partners, our innovation providers, because they're seeding us with these ideas. It's up to us to be the mechanics to make it a reality.
That's awesome. So what's the future hold for you? Because you've won the advance, you were a winner in your category for the Advance Awards, and we're very, very proud of you. And we sit back and we watch this tremendous growth and this tremendous energy and these great results. So, for me, I'm waiting to hear, it's almost a curse if I say I'm waiting to hear news of you becoming a unicorn, because you actually want the customers, you want the profitability that goes with all of that. But what's next for you?
So firstly, I don't know, you probably heard me say we don't subscribe to unicorns. It's zebras, the rare but real exotic creatures, rather than those fictitious ones. So that's Queensland.
Much better.
Yeah, much better. But what's next? I really kind of cast my way forward into 2030 and even beyond, and really principally still answer the same questions in my own mind.
Yep.
And that is, where does it come from? So that's the predominant question that we ask, and we're interested in opaque and even potentially conflicted supply chains. So I kind of cast my mind forward and think, what could be the future blood diamond equivalent in the world? And I remember making the speech at Advance and started notation around the work that we began in batteries, the stored energy sector, cobalt and lithium in the Congo DRC. And so then we're also embedded in the reality of the moment around climate, environment and sustainability. So that question about not only where does it come from is actually a burning question of importance, but also where does it go after it leaves me? So we've been doing a lot of work quietly behind the scenes for nearly 3 years now on how we think about the traceability, repurposing, recycling. How do we design for disassembly with manufacturers? And we've got some great stuff really now coming out of Everledger on our platform. More recently, the work that we did with the team here in Australia over the last number of years is to start to think about those single-use plastics, that have ended up in our ocean, and we've all seen the photographs of what that does to our turtles and our sea life, particularly with straws. But how do we take that, and how do we do traceability, and how do we repurpose it? We're proudly talking about localized or sovereignty of supply chains here in Australia, mostly those secured supply chains, but we are going to have to rethink the types of materials that we use. And the material science will give us new inventions in synthetic biology, yes, but also there is so much that we have in an urban mining perspective. So there's natural mining, where the mining companies dig holes, push away the dirt and get the commodities out the door. But there's as much usable material, because we're consuming so many planets on a year upon year basis, that we have to start tapping into new value streams. So I think about these things in abstractions, and then have this amazing team that sits down and we start to really nut out and put the sewing needle together and start the tapestry work.
You're talking about problems that we currently have. When I was speaking to Adam Gilmore, I asked him, what his intentions were in terms of looking at, in terms of starting as he means, ending as he means to, starting as he means to end. So when he goes into space, pushes the rockets into space, is he thinking about the environmental consequences? Is he planning for the cleanup, so that we don't end up repeating the mistakes of Earth up in the up in space? Is that on your radar at all?
Well, diamond mining in space is even on my radar right now, because we have an incredible amount of resources that are in space that is actually being considered by some of the largest mining companies in the world, and even the Russian government. So yes, space is not just the new frontier, it's the frontier of today. And companies like Gilmore Space give us the ability to use it as a communications overlay. But sure, I think that thinking about urban mining, it encompasses the dimension of space as well as the dimension of Earth.
And in terms of your role as chief entrepreneur, why did you take it on?
Well, it's just so important. The timing of having incredible thought leadership that really understands that the hierarchical order of decision making is no longer fit for purpose. The way upon which we think about just shareholder value has really surpassed Mother Earth's patience. And to embed innovation needs to be embedded horizontally, to think about how we bring innovation logic, which is the way we entrepreneurs think on just a normality of the moment, and how we build teams seems to be so foreign to many corporates as well as government. And yet there are so many reasons why we need innovation, whether it be when our back is against the wall and we have to reimagine and reinvent entire global supply chains to save our souls and our citizens. We don't just necessarily look back to the yellow pages to find the right number to call. You know, there are incredible technology leaps that have been made. And I think that whilst we look at singular disciplines of those technologies, it's 1 or 2 or 10 thought leaders in the world that can really see the exponential power of those when they converge. And it's all about timing. So one would never have imagined, well, certainly I didn't forecast COVID would be here in the year that I'm still chief entrepreneur. But I do also think that Australia has an incredible advantage, and that Queensland can be the flag bearer for innovation, because we have the strength already in those pathways to 14 countries around the world with Trade Investment Queensland. We know and understand what it means to innovate under challenging times and challenging environments, because we get hit with so many different natural disasters and have done on a year upon year basis. So for me, it was time to have an entrepreneur, a chief entrepreneur that was an entrepreneur at the time, building a business at the same time as leading. And I think that's really helped in the concurrency of the moment to help give the view of what's happening now is happening to me at the same time with 100 people around the world.
I'll come back to COVID, but you've spent a lot of time getting out to the regions, talking to the entrepreneurs on the ground, because Queensland's structure is very different to the rest of us. So what have you seen? How well have you been received?
I think what's amazing about the community is that it's a true community and connected in various different ways and in unimaginable instances, where it's not necessarily sitting in an office with white walls and a secretary at the front desk. The innovations in the regions are happening on the farming lands with dirt in the boots. It's happening in, men's sheds that are tinkering now with intergenerational weaving and coming up with solutions to very real problems in agriculture or in farming. It is the connectedness of that exists, and it has been the blood flow of the regions for many, many decades. But now my job has really been the connective tissue, but also to amplify, to give the confidence that just because you're a farmer doesn't mean that you're not an innovator or an entrepreneur. You're a farmpreneur.
I think it's fantastic. And so in terms of your chief entrepreneur's role, how much longer are you in that role, and what are your plans coming up?
Well, the chief entrepreneur's role, I think I've already outstayed my welcome to a certain extent, but yeah, it's a 12-month appoint, and it's an honorary appoint by the Premier. So they asked to extend this role to the end of this year, and gladly so. And I felt that we have a great connective tissue across all of Queensland with our entrepreneurs and innovators and universities, and even to a certain extent parts of our large corporates and family businesses. But there's a lot of work that needed to be done inside government. So the Innovation in Government team, the Innovation Champions Network, one would say they're intrapreneurs. They're the entrepreneurs that are inside of government or inside of corporates. If we think about, the care army with the mud army when the disasters hit, but we've got an innovation army here across Queensland, and it doesn't just mean it's about the innovators or the entrepreneurs or hoodie wearing teenagers. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When we think about really successful entrepreneurs, they come with life experience and they come with the right sense of the third dimension of innovation, and that's the human element of understanding empathy and a cognitive layer. So my work this year is to bring together these two incredible empowering forces, the yin and the yang, and to enable that to bring a whole new balance of meaning to innovation, but to also elevate the state so that they can see themselves not just as the smart state, not just, to lean back into the funding from Advanced Queensland, but also how do we think about Queensland as the platform state for innovation? And, when, 7 of 12 largest influencers corporates in the world are platform and ecosystem.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge for this year. And that'll be the legacy of me.
Well, you've managed to assemble quite a formidable team. Every time I look up at Queensland, you're doing the next thing. And I think this gap is just getting wider and wider. So all power to you. And in terms of COVID, I mean, for Advance, COVID has accelerated our digital transformation. I'm doing what I wanted to do next year or late next year. I'm doing it now. In fact, it's connected me to the rest of the diaspora around the world in a way that, it would have been impossible had there not been a really heavy shove and forcing people onto Zoom and platforms like it. How has COVID helped and hindered what you're doing?
I would say in one respect, actually, it's been business as normal for me because I run a distributed technology business. And so therefore the digital world is my world. So to a certain extent, I feel like many of the future is already being brought forward to today. And I felt like now everyone's caught up with the paradigm of what life looks like. I think it has escalated the importance of innovation logic, because how to act within a crisis or how to act around uncertainty is probably the largest sort of uptake that now I've seen a lot of people being able to embrace. How has it hindered? I would just say it hasn't really hindered too much in my mind, but it's given a sobering reality to the moment of saying, can you really make decisions on a startup or a scale up if you've got 3 weeks or 3 months of cash holding in the business? So this sort of the economic sustainability of what we're doing as a state, as a country, is now being thought out in a much more deliberate sense. And that can only give a strength to the innovation segment rather than just having a well-funded set of programs that are like the best version of the castle and they all end up in, they all end up in the pool room.
I love it. I can't top that. And so I will give you the floor to tell me. There's one question I am keen to see if you want to answer. We're the 4th largest holder of pension funds in the world. We export most of our capital for investment in equity markets overseas. If you were speaking to the CEOs of the superannuation companies, what would you say to them?
Wow. Well, I mean, there's so many things I would say. The financial markets are moving. There's a sense of reality that's now hitting the shores of what we're investing in as organizations and the types of infrastructure that we're trusting to be around in the next 10 and 30 and 100 sort of years, and to be very cognizant of what those investments truly are beneath the surface. And I am talking about, green bonds, future sustainability efforts, and how does that factor in the next sort of 30 to 50 years, because there will be a crumbling, an absolute honeycomb moment of these hardcore infrastructures. And you're already seeing it in the S&P, you're already seeing it in the NASDAQ. So it'll be interesting to see where Australia places itself, because it's traditionally always gone with traditional industries. And, ultimately, who's to say whether those are going to survive in the same way as it has been done before. And the second thing I would say is there's a significant amount of capital that we do export. But yet when we think about our GDP and our export capabilities, it's digging dirt and sending commodities overseas, but not really a lot of value add is to be done here on the manufacturing of products. And who's to say whether we would ever get there, but certainly there's a lot of dialogue around it. We'd have to change the way that we see product manufacturing here. And that's happening through circular economy and other initiatives. Like, we should start to think about durability of products, and then, you know, the first time use and second time use, because build back stronger means we've got to think about the externality of cost or the externality of loss. But an ICT sector, a digital export sector, our skills, like, why wouldn't we, or why couldn't we, or why haven't we, or why aren't we building a Zoom-like infrastructure?
There's nothing stopping us from
There's nothing stopping us from doing that now. And in fact, if anything, we're far better placed as a state and a nation to really triple down on that. And when we think about the Host Plus superannuations of the world, they do have a younger demographic that will be able to wait the time out for those zebras to really start to run across the prairie lands.
That's it. Thank you so much for your time. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to many more.
My pleasure, always available, always. And to everyone listening, be safe, be well. We've just gone through a health crisis, and we're about to hold on to an economic crisis. So let the fun begin, I say. Let the fun begin. See you later.
Thank you very much.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye-bye.